Good day everyone and good day Coach J. We are the Study Hub number 6. Study Hub number 6, Hartizana Janil, Haruddin Raina, Pita Sandara, Amilisin Taiba, and Ibrahim Farhana. And we will explain to you the learning principles. Good afternoon to each and everyone. I am Sundar P. Pita from the Study Hub number 6. And today, I will explain to you the psychoanalytic and psychosexual theory of Sigmund Freud and cognitive theory of Jean Piaget.
Psychoanalytic and psychosexual theory of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, 1856-1939, was the founder of psychoanalysis, a theory of how the mind works and a method of helping people in mental distress. Freud was born on May 6, 1856, in Freiburg, Moravia, to a family of Jewish wool merchants. Psychosexual theory. Freud's psychosexual theory states 5 stages of human development: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. These psychosexual stages capture the main growth points of a person from infancy to adulthood and focus on different facets of one's needs and desires. Psychosexual stages of development: oral, the mouth sucking, swallowing, etc. Anal, the anus withholding or expelling phases. Phallic, the penis for clitoris masturbation. Latent, later or no sexual motivation present. Genital, the penis or vagina, sexual intercourse. The idea of psychoanalytic theory first began to receive serious attention under Sigmund Freud, who formulated his own theory of psychoanalysis in Vienna in the 1890s. Freud was a neurologist trying to find an effective treatment for patients with neurotic or hysterical symptoms. The psychosexual energy or libido was described as the driving force behind behavior. Psychoanalytic theory suggested that personality is mostly established by the age of 5. Early experiences play a large role in personality development and continue to influence behavior later in life. A method of analyzing psychic phenomena and treating emotional disorders that involves treatment session during which the patient is encouraged to talk freely about personal experiences and especially about early childhood and dreams. Sigmund Freud psychosexual theory applied in teaching and learning. Freud focused childhood events and experiences should face in their young age. Sigmund holds sure that in the stages of development and learning should face desire which failure to satisfy brings about fixation visible at their adult age. Psychoanalytic theory divided the psyche into 3 functions: the I, the unconscious source of primitive sexual dependency and aggressive impulses; the superego subconsciously intersects social moral setting standard to live by, and the ego represents a sense of self and meditates between realities of the moment. The psychoanalytic approach helps people explore their past and understand how it affects their present psychological difficulties. It can help patients share the bonds of past experiences to live more fully in the present, explore interpersonal relationships. A 20-year-old, well-bought and healthy, has seemingly irrational fear of mice. The fear makes him tremble at the sight of mouse wrath. A lady finds it difficult to have a lasting relationships. She says she does not trust men. Cognitive Theory by Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget, born August 9, 1896, in Switzerland, died September 16, 1980. Swiss psychologist who was the first to make a systematic study of the acquisition of understanding in children. Jean Piaget, the Swiss psychologist, suggests that children's intelligence undergoes changes as they grow. Cognitive development in children is not any related in acquiring knowledge. Children need to build or develop a mental model of their surrounding world. Cognitive development proposes four stages development: sensory motor stage birth to 2 years, pre-operational stage 2 to 7 years old, concrete operational 7 to 11 years old, formal operational stage age 12 and up. The sequence of the stage across is universal across culture and follow the same invariant exchanging orders. Cognitive involve perception, attention, and memory. Cognitive theory seeks to understand human learning, socialization, and behavior by looking at the brain's internal cognitive processes. Cognitive theories want to understand the way that process information. In cognitive learning approaches teachers the student the skill they need to learn efficiently. This helps students build transferable problem-solving and study skills that they can apply in any subject. Development cognitive skills allow students to build upon previous knowledge. Cognitive theory is an approach to a psychologist that attempts to explain human behavior by understanding you through process. Cognitive mean ability, the growth of child's ability to think and reason. This growth happens differently from age 6 to 12 and from age 12 to 18. The cognitive learning approaches give students the chance to reflect on what they are learning and how it applies to other materials. This helps students develop problem-solving skills they need to create new connection between what they are learning. Improve comprehension encourages students to take a hands-on approach to learning, develop problem-solving skills, promote long-term learning, improves confidence with deeper understanding and stronger learning skills. Students can approach schoolwork with the enthusiasm and confidence.
Good day, Coach J. Martinez. Good day, classmates. So today, I am going to talk about Sociocultural Theory by Lev Vygotsky. Sociocultural theory. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory views human development as a socially mediated processes in which children acquire their culture values, belief, and problem-solving strategies through collaborative dialogue with more knowledgeable member of society. Vygotsky theory is comprised of concepts such as cultural-specific tools, private speech, and the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky theories stress the fundamental role of social interactions in the development of cognitions, as he believes strongly that community plays a central role in the process of making meaning. So, unlike Piaget's notions that children's develop must necessarily precede their learning, but Vygotsky argued learning is a necessary and universal aspect of the process of developing culturally organized, specifically human psychological functions. 1978. In other words, social learning tend to precede, i.e., come before development. Vygotsky has developed a sociocultural approach to cognitive development. He developed his theories at around the same time as Jean Piaget was starting to develop his ideas, 1920s and 30s, but he died at the age of 38, and so his theories are incomplete, although some of his writing is still being translated from Russians. Like Piaget's, Vygotsky could be described as constructivist in that he was interested in knowledge acquisitions as a cumulative event, with new experience and understanding incorporated into existing cognitive framework. However, while Piaget's theory is in structure, arguing that development is governed by psychological stage, Vygotsky denies the existence of any arguing framework independent of culture and context. No single principle, such as Piaget's equilibrations, can account for development. Individuals' development cannot be understood without reference to the social and cultural context within which it is embedded. Higher mental processes in the individual have their origin in social processes. Vygotsky's ideas. Vygotsky theory is focused on the role of culture in the development of mental abilities, e.g., speech and reasoning to children. And according to Vygotsky, adults in society foster children's cognitive development by engaging them in challenging and meaningful activities. Adults convey to children the way the culture interprets and responds to the world. They show the meaning they attach to object, even an experience they provide a child with that to think, the knowledge, and how to think, the process, the tools to think with. And the interaction with other significant increases not only the quality of information and the number of skills a child develops, it also affects the development of higher order mental functions such as formal reasoning. And Vygotsky argued that higher mental abilities could only develop through the interaction with more advanced others. Vygotsky agreed with Piaget that development of cognitive abilities take place in stage, and he also agreed broadly with the descriptions of the stage. However, he viewed cognitive development as a social process where children learn from experienced adults. And Vygotsky stated that language has two functions. Inner speech is used for formal reasoning, and external speech is used to converse with others. These operations occur separately indeed before the age of 2. A child employs words socially, they possess no internal language. Once thought and language merge. However, the social language is internalized and assists the child with their reasonings. Thus, the social environment is ingrained within the child's learning. Tools of intellectual adaptation. Vygotsky claimed that infants are born with the basic abilities for intellectual development called elementary mental functions. And elementary mental functions include attention, sensation, perceptions, and memory. Eventually, through interaction within the social-cultural environment, these are developed into more sophisticated and effective mental processes, which Vygotsky refers to as higher mental functions. Each culture provides its children tools of intellectual adaptation that allow them to use the basic mental function more effectively and adaptively. Tools of intellectual adaptation is Vygotsky's term for method of thinking and problem-solving strategies that children internalize through social interaction with the more knowledgeable members of society. For example, memory in young children, this is limited by biological factors. However, culture determines the type of memory strategy we develop. For example, in Western culture, children learn note-taking to aid memory, but in free literate societies, other strategies must be developed, such as tying knots in a string to remember, or carrying pebbles, or repetitions of the names of ancestors until large number can be repeated. Vygotsky therefore sees cognitive functions, even those carried out alone, as affected by the belief, values, and tools of intellectual adaptation of the culture in which a person developed, and therefore socio-cultural determine the tools of intellectual adaptations, therefore vary from the culture to culture, as in the memory. Example: social influence on cognitive development. Like Piaget's, Vygotsky believed that young children are curious and actively involved in their own learning and the discovery and development of new understanding However, Vygotsky placed more emphasis on social contribution to the process of development, whereas Piaget's emphasized self-initiative initiated discovery. And according to Vygotsky, 1978, much important learning by the child occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. The tutor may model behaviors and or provide verbal instructions for the child. Vygotsky refers to this cooperative or collaborate dialogue. The child seeks to understand the actions of instructions provided by the tutor. Often the parent or teachers then initialize the information using it to guide or regulate their own performance. Shuffles 1996 give the examples of a young girl who is given her first jigsaw alone. She performs poorly in attempting to solve the puzzle. The father then sits with her and describes and demonstrates some basic strategies such as finding all the corner edge piece and provide a couple of pieces for the child to put together, and offers encouragement when she does so. As the child becomes more competent, the father allows the child to work more independently. According to Vygotsky, these of social interactions involving cooperative or collaborative dialogue promotes cognitive development. In order to gain an understanding of Vygotsky's theories on cognitive development, first through interaction with others and then integrated into others' individual mental structures. Every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. First between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. This applies equally to voluntarily attention to logical memory and to the formation of concept. All the higher functions originated as a cultural relationship between individuals. Teaching styles based on constructivism mark as conscious effort to move from traditional objectivist model didactic memory-oriented transmission models to Canala and Rafe 1994 to a more student-centered approach. Traditionally, schools have not promoted environment in which the student play an active role in their own abducted as well as their peers versus Vygotsky theories, however, requires the teachers and students to play untraditional roles as they collaborate with each other. Instead of teaching dictating her meaning to student for future recitation, a teacher should collaborate with her student in order to create meaning in ways that student can make their own. For example, a pupil and teacher begin a task with different levels of skills and understanding. As each adjusts to the perspective of others, the teacher has to translate their own insight in a way that is within the grasp of the pupil, and the pupil develop more competitive understanding of a task or concept. The pupil is able to internalize the how to do it part of a task as part of their private or inner speech dialogue. Vygotsky referred to this process as intersubjectively ZPD because Vygotsky asserted that cognitive change occurs within the zone of proximal development. Instruction would be designed to reach a developmental level that is just above the student's current developmental levels. Vygotsky proclaims learning which is oriented toward developmental levels that have already been reached is ineffectively from the viewpoint of the child's overall development. It does not aim for a few stage of development process, but rather lags behind this process. Approximate is necessary for cognitive development with the zone of proximal development. The individuals participating in the peer collaborations or guided teachers' instructions must share the same focus in order to access the zone of proximal development. Joint attention and shared problem solving is needed to create a process of cognitive, social, and emotional interchange. Furthermore, it is essential that the partner be on different developmental levels, and the higher level of partner be aware of the lowest level If does not occur or if one partner dominates, the interaction is less successful. Vygotsky theories also feed into the current interest in collaborative learning, suggest that group members should have different levels of ability so more advanced skills can help less advanced members operated within their ZPD. Scaffolding and reciprocal teaching are effective strategies to access the zone of proximal development. Reciprocal teaching, a contemporary educational application of Vygotsky theory, is reciprocal teaching, used to improve student ability to learn from text. In this method, teachers and students collaborated in learning and practicing four key skills, which is summarizing, questioning, clarifying, and predicting. The teacher's role in the process is reduced over time. Reciprocal teachings allow for the creation of dialogue between student and teachers. These two-way communications become an instructional strategy by encouraging students to go beyond answering questions and engage in that discourse. A study conducted by demonstrate the Vygotskian approach with reciprocal teaching method in the successful program to teach reading strategies. The teachers and students alternated turns leading small group discussion on a reading. After modeling for reading strategies, students began to assume the teaching role. Result of this study showed significant gains over the instructional strategies. The physical classroom based on Vygotsky theory would provide in clustered desks or tables and workspace for peers, instructions, collaboration with small group interactions. Scaffolding, also Vygotsky theory of cognitive development on learners, is relevant to instructional concepts such as scaffolding and apprenticeship, in which teacher or more advanced peer help to structure or arrange a task so that a novice can work on it successfully. A teacher role is to identify each individual's current level of development and provide them with opportunities to cross their ZPD. A crucial element in this process is the use of what later became known as scaffolding, the way in which the teacher provides students with framework and experiences which encourage them to extend their existing schema and incorporate new skills, competence, and understanding. Scaffolding describes the condition that support the child's learning to move from what they already know to new knowledge and abilities. Scaffolding requires the teacher to provide the student that opportunity to extend their current skills and knowledge. And during scaffolding, the support offered by the adult or more knowledge others gradually decreases as the child becomes more skilled in the task. As the adult withdraw their help, the child assumes more of the strategic planning and eventually gain competence to master similar problem without the aid of teacher or more knowledgeable peer. It is important to note that this is more than simply instructions. Learning experience must be presented in such a way as actively changes existing mental structure and provide frameworks too. 5 ways in which an adult can scaffold a child's development. 1. Engaging the child's interest. 2. Maintaining the child's interest in the task, e.g. avoiding distractions and providing clear instruction on how to start the task. 3. Keeping the child's frustrations under control by supportive interactions. Adopt instructions according where the child is struggling. 4 is emphasizing the important features of the task. 5 is demonstrating the task, showing the child how to do the task in simple, clear steps. As the child progresses through the ZPD, the level of scaffolding necessary decline from 5 to 1. The teacher must engage student interest, simplify tasks so they are manageable, and motivate students to pursue the instructional goal. In addition, the teacher must look for discrepancies between student effort and solutions, control for frustration and risk, and model on idealized version if the act is The Samples of Sociocultural Development by Lev Vygotsky. Inner speech is not the interior aspect of external speech. It is a function in itself. It still remains speech, thought connected with the word, but while in external speech, thought is embodied in words. In inner speech, words rise as they bring forth thought. Inner speech is to large extent thinking in pure meanings. Vygotsky was the first psychologist to document the importance of private speech. He considered private speech as the transition point between social and inner speech, the moment in development where language and thought unite to constitute verbal thinking. Thus, private speech in Vygotsky's views was the earliest manifestations of inner speech. Indeed, private speech is more similar in its form and function to inner speech than social speech. Private speech is typically defined in contrast to social speech as speech addressed to the itself, not to others, for the purpose of self-regulations rather than communications. Unlike inner speech, which is covert, private speech is overt in contrast to Piaget's 1959 notions of private speech is representing a development dead end, and Vygotsky 1934 to 1987 viewed private speech as a revolution in development, which is triggered when free verbal thought and free intellectual language come together to create fundamentally new forms of mental functioning. In addition to disagreeing on the functioning significance of private speech, Vygotsky and Piaget also offered opposing views on the development course of private speech and the environment circumstance in which it occurs most often. Taught private speech, children begin to collaborate with themselves in the same way more knowledgeable others collaborated with them in the achieving of a given functions. Vygotsky sees private speech as a means for children to plan activities and strategies, and therefore aid their development. Private speech is the use of language for self-regulations of behavior. Language is therefore an accelerator to thinking, understanding, and views language in the way Vygotsky believed that children who engage in large amount of private speech are more socially competent than children who do not use it extensively. Notes that private speech does not merely accompany a child's activity but act as a tool used by the development child to facilitate cognitive process such as overcoming task obstacles and enhancing imagination, thinking, and conscious awareness. Children use private speech most often during intermediate difficult tasks because they are attempting to self-regulate by verbal planning and organizing their thought. The frequency and content of private speech are correlated with behavior or performance. For example, private speech appears to be functionally related to cognitive performance. It appears at times of difficult with a task. For example, tasks related to executive functions. Schoolwork in both language and mathematics provide empirical support for the notions of private speech. She found that most private speech exhibited by children serves to describe or guide the child's actions. Berg also discovered that the child engaged in private speech more often when working alone on challenging tasks and also when their teachers was not immediately available to help them. Furthermore, Berg also found that private speech develops similarly in all children regarding of cultural background. Vygotsky proposed that private speech is a product of an individual's social environment. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that there exist high positive correlations between rates of social interaction and private speech in learning. Children raised in cognitively and linguistically stimulating environment situation more frequently observed in the high of socioeconomic status families start using and internalizing private speech faster than children from less privileged background. Indeed, children raised in environment characterized by low verbal and social exchange exhibit delay in the private speech development. Children's use of private speech diminish as they grow older and follows a curvilinear trend. This is a due change in autogenetic development whereby children are able to internalize language to inner speech in order to self-regulate in their behavior. And Vygotsky proposed that private speech diminish and disappear with age, not because it becomes socialized as Piaget suggested, but rather because it goes underground to constitute inner speech or verbal thought. Applying Vygotsky theory to the classroom, Vygotsky's approach to child development is a form of social constructivism based on the idea that cognitive functions are the product of social interactions. Vygotsky emphasized the collaborative nature of learning by the constructions of knowledge through social negotiation. He rejected that assumption made by Piaget that it was possible to separate learning from its social structure. Vygotsky believed everything is learned on two levels. First, through interaction with others, and then integrated into others' individual mental structures. Every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level, and later on the individual level. First between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. This applies equally to voluntarily attention to logical memory and to the formation of concept. All the higher functions originated as a cultural relationship between individuals. Teaching styles based on constructivism mark as conscious effort to move from traditional objectivist model didactic memory-oriented transmission models to Canala and Rafe 1994 to a more student-centered approach. Traditionally, schools have not promoted environment in which the student play an active role in their own abducted as well as their peers versus Vygotsky theories, however, requires the teachers and students to play untraditional roles as they collaborate with each other. Instead of teaching dictating her meaning to student for future recitation, a teacher should collaborate with her student in order to create meaning in ways that student can make their own. For example, a pupil and teacher begin a task with different levels of skills and understanding. As each adjusts to the perspective of others, the teacher has to translate their own insight in a way that is within the grasp of the pupil, and the pupil develop more competitive understanding of a task or concept. The pupil is able to internalize the how to do it part of a task as part of their private or inner speech dialogue. Vygotsky referred to this process as intersubjectively. ZPD, because Vygotsky asserts more knowledge others, which is MKO, and the zone of proximal development, also known as ZPD. More knowledge other, or MKO. The more knowledge other is somewhat self-explanatory, and it refers to someone who has a better understanding or a highly ability level than the learner with respect to a particular task, process, or concept. Although the implication is that the MKO is a teacher or an older adult, this is necessarily the case. Many times a child peers or an adult children may be individuals with more knowledge or experience. For example, who is more likely to know more about the newest teenage music groups, how to win at the most recent PlayStation game, or how to correctly perform the newest dance craze, a child or their parents? In fact, the MKO need not to be a person at all. Some companies to support employees in their learning process are now using electronic performance support systems. Electronic tutors have also been used in educational settings to facilitate and guide students through the learning process. The key to MKO is that they must have or be programmed with more knowledge about topic being learned than the learner does. Zone of Proximal Development, or ZPD. The concept of the more knowledgeable others is integrally related to the second important principles of Vygotsky's work, the zone of proximal development. This is an important concept that relates to the difference between what a child can achieve independently and what a child can achieve with guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner. Vygotsky consequently focused much more closely on social interaction as an aid to learning, arguing that left alone, children will develop but not to their full potentials. He refers to the gap between actual and potential learning as the zone of proximal development and argues that it is the only true collaboration with adults and other learners that this gap can be bridged. The zone of proximal development is the gap between the level of actual development, what the child can do on his own, and the level of potential development, what a child can do with the assistance of more advanced and competent individuals. Social interaction therefore support the child's cognitive development in the ZPD, learning to a higher level of reasoning. For example, the child could not solve the jigsaw puzzle in the examples above by itself and would have taken a long time to do so. But what was able to solve it following interactions with the father and has developed competence that these skills that will be applied to future jigsaws. ZPD is the zone where interaction is the most beneficial as it is when the task is just beyond the individual's capabilities. To learn, we must be presented with tasks that are just out of our ability range. Challenging tasks promote the maximum cognitive growth. As a result of shared dialogues with more knowledgeable others who provide hints and instructions as well as encouragement, the child is able to initialize that how to do it, part of the task as part of their inner or private speech. These can then be used by the child on later occasions when they tackled a similar task on their own. Vygotsky 1970s sees the zone of proximal development as the area where the most sensitive instructions or guidance should be given, allowing the child to develop skills they will then use on their own, developing the higher mental functions. And Vygotsky also views interaction with peers as an effective way of developing skills and strategies. He suggests that teachers use cooperative learning exercise where less competent children develop with help from more skillful peers within the zone of proximal development. Evidence for Vygotsky and the ZPD. Freud's 1990 conducted a study in which children had to decide which item of furniture should be placed in the particular areas of a dollhouse. Some children were allowed to play with their mother in a similar situations before they attempt a zone of proximal development, while others were allowed to work on his own by themselves. Piaget's discovery learning. And Freud found that those who had previously worked with their mother ZPD showed the greatest importance compared with their first attempt at the task, the conclusion being that guide learned within the ZPD led to the greater understanding performance than working alone discovery learning. And Vygotsky and language. Vygotsky believed that language developed from social interactions for communication purposes, and Vygotsky viewed language as man's greatest tools, a means for communicating with the outside world. According to Vygotsky, language plays two critical roles in cognitive development. One is it is the main means by which adults transmit information to children. And the second one is language itself become a very powerful tool of intellectual adaptations. Vygotsky differentiate between three forms of language: social speech, which is external communications used to talk to others, typical from the age of 2, and private speech, typical from the age of 3, which is directed to the self and serve an intellectual functions. And finally, private speech goes underground, diminishing the audibility as it takes on self-regular function and transform into silent inner speech. For Vygotsky's, thought and language are initially separate systems from the beginning of life, merging at around 3 years of age. At this point, speech and thought become interdependent. Thought become verbal, speech become representations. When this happens, children monologues initialize to become inner speech. The internalizations of language is important as it drives cognitive development. Inner speech is not the interior aspect of external speech. It is a function in itself. It still remains speech. Thought connected with the word, but while in external speech, thought is embodied in words. In inner speech, words rise as they bring forth thought. Inner speech is to large extent thinking in pure meanings. Vygotsky was the first psychologist to document the importance of private speech. He considered private speech as the transition point between social and inner speech, the moment in development where language and thought unite to constitute verbal thinking. Thus, private speech in Vygotsky's views was the earliest manifestations of inner speech. Indeed, private speech is more similar in its form and function to inner speech than social speech. One's relationship to society from infancy to through later life. Erikson is the primary theorist identified with the development of psychosocial theory. Erikson's theory described the impact of social experience across the whole lifespan. Erikson was interested in how social interact and relationship played a role in the development and growth of human being. Erikson's theory was based on what is known as the epigenetic principles, and these principles suggest that people grow in a sequence that occurs over time and in the context of larger community. Theory. Stage 1, trust versus mistrust. It's a birth to 2 years old. And stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. It's a toddler year. And stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. It's a preschool year, 6 to 11 years old. And the fourth is industry versus inferiority, 6 to 12 years old. Stage 5 is identity versus confusion. It's a 12 years old to 18. And stage 6 is intimacy versus isolation, 18 to 40. Stage 7 is generativity versus stagnation. It's age 40 to 65. And the last one is integrity versus despair, 65 to death. Each stage in Erikson's theory built on a preceding stage and paves the way for following period of development. And in each stage, Erikson's believed that people experience a conflict that serves as a turning point in development. In Erikson's view, these conflicts are centered in either developing a psychological quality or failing to develop that quality. During these times, the potential for personal growth is high, but so is the potential for failure. And if people successfully deal with the conflict, they emerge from the stage with psychological strength that will serve them well for the rest of their life. If they fail to deal effectively with this conflict, they may not develop the essential skills needed for a sense of self. Erikson also believed that a sense of competence motivated actions. Each stage in Erikson's theory is concerned with becoming competent in one area of life. If the story is handled well, the person will feel a sense of mastery, which is sometimes referred to as ego strength or ego quality. If the stage is managed poorly, the person will emerge with a sense of inadequacy in that effect of development. So these are the first stage, which is trust versus mistrust. Trust versus mistrust. The first stage of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development occurs between birth and 1 year of age, and it is the most fundamental stage in life because an infant is utterly dependent. Developing trust is based on the dependability and quality of the child's caregiver. At this point in development, the child is utterly dependent upon adult caregivers for everything they need to survive, including food, love, warmth, and safety and nurturing. And if a caregiver fails to provide adequate care and love, the child will come to feel that they cannot trust or depend upon the adults in their life. So, if a child successfully develops trust, the child will feel safe and secure in the world. But caregivers who are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or rejecting contribute to feeling of mistrust in the children under their care. Failure to develop trust will result in fear and a belief that the world is inconsistent and unpredictable. During the first stage of psychosocial development, children develop a sense of trust. When caregivers provide reliability, care, and affections, a lack of these will lead to mistrust. No child is going to develop a sense of 100% trust or 100% doubt. But Erickson believed that successful development was all about striking a balance between the two opposing sides. When this happens, children acquire hope, which Erickson described as an openness to experience tempered by someone's wariness that danger may be present. And the stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. The second stage of Erickson's theory of psychosocial development takes place during early childhood and is focused on children developing a greater sense of personal control. At this point in development, children are just starting to gain a little independence. They're starting to perform basic actions on their own and making simple decisions about what they prefer. By allowing kids to make choices and gain control, parents and caregivers can help children develop a sense of autonomy. The essential them of this stage is that children need to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence. Potty training plays an important role in helping children develop his sense of autonomy. Like Freud, Erickson believed that toilet training was a vital part of this process. However, Erickson's reasoning was quite different than of Freud's. Erickson believed that learning to control and a sense of independence, other important events including gaining more control over food choices, toy preferences, and clothing selections. So, children who are shamed for their accident may be left without a sense of personal control. Success during this stage of psychosocial development leads to the feeling of autonomy. Failure results in the feeling of shame and doubt. Children who successfully complete this stage feel secure and confident, while those who do not are left with a sense of inadequacy and self-doubt. Erickson believed that achieving a balance between autonomy and shame and doubt would lead to will, which is the belief that children can act with intentions within the reasons and limits. Stage 3. Initiative stage of psychosocial development take place during the preschool years. At this point in psychosocial development, children begin to assert their power and control over the world through directing play and other social interactions. Children who are successful at this stage feel capable and able to lead others, and those who fail to acquire these skills are left with a sense of guilt, self-doubt, and lack of initiative. So, the major theme of the third stage of psychosocial development is that children need to begin asserting control and power over the environment. Success in this stage leads to a sense of purpose. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. When an ideal balance of individual initiative and a willingness to work with others is achieved, the ego quality known as the purposes emerge. Industry versus inferiority. The fourth psychosocial stage takes place during the early school year from approximately age 5 to 11. Through social interaction, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishment and abilities. Children need to cope with new social and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feeling of inferiority. So, children who are encouraged commended by parents and teachers develop a feeling of competence and belief in their skills. And those who receive little or no encouragement from parents, teachers, or peers with doubt their abilities to be successful. So, I believe successful's finding a balance at this stage of psychosocial development leads to the strengths known as competence, in which children develop a belief in their abilities to handle the tasks set before them. Stage 5. Identity versus confusion. The fifth psychosocial stage takes place during the often turbulent teenage years. This stage plays an essential role in developing a sense of personal identity which will continue to influence behavior and development for the rest of a person's life. Teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to role confusion, and weak sense of self. During adolescence, children explore their independence and develop a sense of self. And those who receive proper encouragement and reinforcement through personal exploration will emerge from this stage with a strong sense of self and feeling of independence and control. And those who remain unsure of their belief and desire will feel insecure and confused about themselves and the future. So, what is the identity? When psychologists talk about identity, they are referring to all of the beliefs, ideals, and values that help shape and guide a person's behavior. Completing this stage successfully leads to fidelity, which Erikson described as an ability to live by society's standards and expectations. And also, Erikson believed that each stage of psychosocial development was important. He placed a particular emphasis on the development of ego identity. And ego identity is the conscious sense of self that we develop through social interactions and become a center focus during the identity versus confusion stage of psychosocial development. According to Erikson, our ego identity constantly change due to new experience and informations we acquire. In our daily interactions with others, as we have new experiences, we also take on changes that can help or hinder the development of identity. So, the importance of our personal identity is it give each of us an integrated and cohesive sense of self that endures through our lives. Our sense of personal identity is shaped by our experience and interactions with others. And it is this identity that helps us guide our actions, beliefs, and behaviors as we age. Stage 6. Intimacy versus isolations. Young adults need to form intimate, loving relationship with other people. Success leads to strong relationship, while failure results in loneliness and isolations. This stage covers the periods of early adulthood, and we people are exploring personal relationships. Erikson believed it was vital that people develop close commitment relationship with other people. And those who are successful at this step will form relationships that are enduring and secure. Building on earlier stage, remember that each step built on skills learned in previous step. Erikson believed that a strong sense of personal identity was important for developing intimate relationship. Studies have demonstrated that those with a poor sense of self tend to have less committed relationship and are more likely to struggle with emotional isolations, and loneliness, and also depressions. So, successful resolutions of this stage results in the virtue known as love. It is marked by the ability to form lasting, meaningful relationship with other people. Stage 7. Generativity versus stagnations. Adults need to create and nurture things that will outlet them, often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to feeling of unusefulness and accomplishment, while failure results in shallow involvement in the world. During adulthood, we continue to build our lives, focusing on our on our career and family. And those who are successful during this phase will feel that they are contributing to the world by being active in their home and community. And to those who fail to attain these skills will feel unproductive and uninvolved in the world. So, care is the virtue achieved when this stage is handled successfully. Being proud of your accomplishment, watching your children grow into adults, and developing a sense of unity with your life partner are important accomplishments of this stage. And the last stage of psychosocial development, which is integrity versus despair. The final psychosocial stage occurs during old age and is focused on reflecting back on life. At this point in development, people look back on the event of their lives and determine if they are happy with the life that they live or if they regret the things they did or didn't do. Erickson's theory differed from many others because it addressed development throughout the entire lifespan, including old age. Older adults need to look back on life and feel a sense of fulfillment. Success at this stage leads to feeling of wisdom, while failure results in regret, bitterness, and despair. At this stage, people reflect back on the events of their lives and take stock. Those who look back on a life they feel was well lived will feel.
Hi, my name is Zaina Haruddin, and now we will discuss about classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. Classical conditioning is learning through association and was first demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov, showed that dogs could be conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell if that sound was repeatedly presented at the same time that they were given food. First discovered by Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov (1849 to 1936), classical conditioning is a learning process governed by association between an environmental stimulus, and another stimulus which occurs naturally. Classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens unconsciously. When you learn through classical conditioning, an automatic response is paired with a specific stimulus. Many things of the school subjects are learned more adequately through this process. Reading, writing, spelling, or habits are learned more effectively through the process of conditioning. Classical conditioning, later developed by Watson 1913, involves learning to associate an unconditioned stimulus that ready brings about a particular response with a new condition. Classical conditioning explains many aspects of human behavior. It plays an important role in generating emotional response, advertising, addiction, psychotherapy, hunger, and itch. Teachers can apply classical conditioning in the class by creating a positive classroom environment, overcome anxiety or fear. Hi everyone, my name is Zaina Haruddin and my topic for today is all about ecological theory by Bronfenbrenner. Bronfenbrenner ecological system theory is one of the most accepted explanations regarding the influence of social environments on human development. Von Frankenfurter is a Russian-born American psychologist who is most known for his ecological system theory. His work with the United States government helped in the affirmation of Head Start program 1965. The ecological theory suggests that resources availability places a large constraint on the relative advantage of different kinds of tissues deployment. Bronfenbrenner ecological system theory is one of the most accepted explanations regarding the influence of social environment on human development. This theory argues that the environment you grow up will affect every fact of your life. Ecological system theory views child development as a complex system of relationships affected by multiple levels of surroundings environment. According to the ecological system theory, if the child's parents and teachers get along and have a good relationship, This should have a positive effects on development in that teachers and parents do not get along. Ecological theory shows how much each and every aspect of a person's environment can affect them, their lifestyle, and their development. American psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner formulated the ecological system theory to explain how social environments affect the children's development. This theory emphasized the importance of studying children in multiple environments known as ecological systems in the attempt to understand their development.
Now, let's discuss the metacognitive theory. Now, let's quick comparison the cognitions and metacognition. Cognition. When we talk about cognition, cognitions are our thoughts, the process. It is a fact that we think and how we think. While metacognitions, the awareness of our cognitions that we're talking about thinking. You have Fabel's concept of meta memory. So first it is intentional. Thinking about how we think can't be stumbled upon. It needs a strategic and because of a specific technique such as self-questioning, like why we need to do or why we do this. Next, it's foresighted. We need to think our plan before conducting a task but coming up with a plan or attack on studies. We need to think what is the reason we are to plan this. So that is the foresighted. We need to making a plan before doing some or doing conducting some research like that. So next, it's used to accomplish a goal. We should using meta strategies to be better working or learning. So there are three stages of metacognitive in child development by Fabel. So the three stages of metacognitive that are storage. So storage are storing information, intentional thinking, repetition, searching for a favorite toy. If a child is having a favorite toy and he wants to play that toy, he must find it his favorite or her favorite toy. So second stage as I recall, intentionally organizing knowledge, playing a game of a memory. For example of recall, the child is having a play of the next day, and the other day he wants to play a toy and he misplaced that toy and he must remember he must trying to remember where he put or her put her toy. So that's example of recall. The last stages is systematic strategies, self-questioning and thinking aloud. And this is the some example of metacognitive. Law of Learning by Edward Thorndike. So, who is Edward Thorndike? Let's proceed. Edward Thorndike in 1871 to 1949 was a professor of American Psychology, a disciple of William James, who developed a series of laws about trial and error learning. So Thorndike's theories are considered the precursor of America with reasons that will find its maximum exponent in the figure of Skinner, the father of operant conditioning. There are three types of three primary laws of learning by Edward. Those laws are law of preparation, law of exercise, and law of effect. So let's discuss the first law. Law of preparation that affirms that the preparations of the exponent of the subject contributes the learning of other words, that the own expectations of the subjects constitutes the instinct reinforcements of all actions. So the next stages such as law of exercise. Law of exercise that is the sustain of exercise or practice of appropriate response contributions of state and connections between the stimulus and corresponding response. The next stage are the law of effect. Law of effect is considered the most important according of this law. The successions of stimuli the response is enough for learning to occur.